Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of New Agreements. I'm really stoked to have Douglas Horn with me today. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Dave. How's it going?
Yeah, good. And he will explain himself a lot better than I can, but there's a lot to learn about the world of decentralization and blockchains today. So we're going to go slowly. We're going to do a 101 and explain everything. Every time I don't understand something, I'm going to put my hand up and say, let us know what it means. But we've been doing a lot of these Zoom sessions for New Agreements recently whilst we've been in lockdown. So you can go and check out those on Regenerative Agriculture, thinking about SDRs, the International Monetary Fund's financial tool. We've got a couple more to come actually, but today I'm really excited to be thinking about this mechanism that so many of us hear about with crypto or Bitcoin. But let's explore that and see where you're coming from, because the guys we've been working with are from your clan. You know, we've been working on this Corco Coin project for a number of months with some amazing guys, and there's a lot more to come on that. We're not here to talk specifically about that today, but that is what's brought our worlds together. And you may not know this, Douglas, but one of my friends, Tom, runs a tech company in London. One of his advisors is a professor at Cambridge who he introduced me to, and I talked to him about the Corco Coin project. He then went to give a talk on alternative finance, which is what he lectures on at Cambridge. And Jim from Telos Foundation was there at the talk and then went to speak to Keith and then connected us in from there. And that's where the journey has developed over the last 6 months in trying to bring this Corco Coin vision to become a reality. But you are the chief architect of said Telos, aren't you? And so what does that mean, and why is that not being a founder?
Okay. Well, yeah, my name is Douglas Horn. I go by chief architect because that's more descriptive of what I actually did. Blockchains have been around for a while, for about 10 years. Generally, they're projects that are launched by someone. The first one was launched by a person who has remained anonymous, goes by the person or people go by the name Satoshi Nakamoto. And it's actually been, very important, I think, that we don't constantly have a person who's a founder who we can go back to, who, we get upset about their tweets and things like that. It's really kind of a ridiculous idea because these are decentralized groups. They only work as decentralized groups. So the concept that there's any one founder is that's by definition of centralization. It's not a benefit. I wrote up a white paper that discussed what I thought would be good ideas, and was able to assemble a group of about 130 people who worked together. Those ideas formed the nucleus of a group of people who are willing to work for free for a long time, very hard, because of the belief that this was actually a very important technology for people.
And before we come on to the importance of that,
yeah,
what was your journey that led you up to this moment where you were in a position to think about these things? Have you been in academia or in business, or what is your journey?
No. I have sort of a strange background. I've worked as a sort of a creative for most of my career. So I wrote a few things. I contributed to writing some computer books a long time ago. I did quite a bit of writing, and I worked in the entertainment field as a writer, and then later as a director and producer for about 15 years. Never to great success, but fed my family and enjoyed that process. I invented games, board games and computer games. And then when blockchain became a technology, I sort of quietly went into that and just found myself, I never had any intention of being out in front of any of these things. I only did that because I thought that there was a really great opportunity that was being unmet to really fulfill the actual aims, the stated aims of blockchain and crypto and all these things, which is to bring people together, to put people on equal footing, to make the ledger, right, be written by everyone and agreed to, have a consensus by everyone. And which is not the situation we have now at all. We have a very centralized situation in terms of our economy, in terms of how we're able to work with other people. There's a lot of layers between us, and the outcome is, we don't really have the control over our individual lives that we would like to. If I, as an American, want to do some kind, want to do some kind of business deal or just work together with someone in Iran, which I'm actually doing right now on a project that is bringing privacy to coronavirus testing. Right, this is a free open source project we're doing, people all over the world, and one of the key developers there is in Iran because he's also concerned about that. Now, I can do that as a free project because there's no money changing hands. But if money were to change hands, I would be breaking a law in the United States and subject to great penalties. But I'll tell you, this guy and these developers are great guys. There's no difference. Like when you think about these things, there's no difference between this guy and me. He lives in a country that my country is deemed to be an enemy, and I live in a country that his country has deemed to be an enemy. We get along great as individuals, right? This is the reality, right? All these businesses and big business and corporations and governments have gotten in the way of individuals to work together. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to like everyone in Iran, and I'm sure they're not going to like everyone in the United States, but I literally cannot work with somebody there in any paying capacity because of old agreements made by our government. And there's many examples of this, of how we're just really not in control of our lives, and we're not in control of the consensus mechanism, right? The agreement mechanism, the social contract that drives these decisions. And so we need a new agreement. I mean, your show has the perfect name.
Well, before we get on to all of that and around consensus, let's just take people on a journey to understand what we're talking about with blockchain, because most people's experience of crypto, or what they think is blockchain, would be Bitcoin. And therefore there is not necessarily understanding either that this ledger that I'll let you define can be used for things other than money. It can be used for other services as well. So what do you mean when you say blockchain?
When people experience blockchain from the Bitcoin first thing, it's like experiencing the internet from email first, right? It's an application. It's not necessarily the ultimate application. Blockchain it's a ledger, right? What's a ledger? I'm going to give you a really simple example I think most people can understand. Most of us have seen Excel or Google Sheets or some kind of spreadsheet program. That's a ledger. Values are written. It's just like an old-timey, like bank book that somebody would write numbers in. It's a ledger. So it's basically a recording of numbers. Right now, there are ledgers in our lives. Your bank book is a ledger.
Yeah.
What you owe Spotify, there's a ledger there, right? For what music you're downloading, how much your monthly fee is going to be. That ledger is then used, to determine how artists get paid for their music being played, right? Those are all ledgers. They're all just recordings. They're all just data. Right now, for the whole of the computer age, those have been centralized, which means that data, even though we call it the cloud and stuff, there's really no cloud. There's just someone else's computer, and someone else can change that. So if it's Spotify, they're the record keeper, right? They have the ability to change things, unless some hacker comes in and hacks them, and then they're the record keeper. Unless, they're storing on some cloud service and they decide to change things. There's a lot of people who could change things. You wouldn't want the recording of all your money into a ledger that you don't control or somebody else does.
That's fine. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire here, though. I just want to know what a blockchain is.
Oh,
we know what a ledger is. What's blockchain?
Okay, sorry. Okay, so really simply, a blockchain is a ledger of transactions. You have 10, I have 7, Susie has 15. If I give one to you, then our numbers change. These are stored in blocks of transactions. Every chunk is a block. The block is made of different types of data. And the first thing it does is it takes the whole block before it, right? And it hashes that. It turns that into a number, a really, really, really big number that you can only get by taking all that data and running it through an algorithm. And then it makes that the first thing in this block. So there's no way to change this block unless we change the block before it. And there's no way to change that unless you change the block before that. Mm-hmm. It's a chain of blocks of transactions. Mm-hmm. And then the blocks themselves are made secure because you need to get a lot of people in different organizations have the opportunity to write and verify that. And if they agree on it, then it's a valid block. If they don't agree on it, then it's not a valid block, and people try to agree on the transactions for another one. Those are the two secure things. You can't change stuff back in time, and you can't change any current block without a lot of different people agreeing that that is valid.
you've explained that you have what a ledger is, which is a list of numbers, kind of like an Excel spreadsheet, and you can store that in a centralized way where someone has control, or you can store it in one of these blocks that's in a chain, which makes it decentralized and really hard to control. And so that's what the power of this is that it makes it very safe and secure. And I think what we've said is that Bitcoin is an example of using that decentralized ledger to power money, but there are other use cases as well. I'm interested to know, what is it that attracts you most to blockchain, and why have you ended up becoming the architect of Telos, which we'll talk about? What is it, the money application, or is it other applications that are most interesting to you?
Yeah, no, it's the empowerment of individuals. Once you strip out the need for a centralized organization like banks or governments or things like that, it creates this, what we were talking about before, which is this power to interact directly with another individual. It removes the intermediaries, and it means that you can work person to person.
And so why did we need another blockchain network? Because there was the Bitcoin one, there's Ethereum, some people will have heard of. Why did you feel the need to generate a new one?
Each of these has their own use case, but if we're really looking at, something that allows people all over the world to work together, then it has to be very fast. It has to have high capacity, and it has to be very secure. Bitcoin makes one of these blocks about every 10 minutes. Because people are competing to create these blocks, which is part of what makes it decentralized and what's called proof of work, they are running thousands and hundreds of thousands of computers that the only thing they do is run a bunch of math. And whoever gets the math problem right first gets to write the block. That was a great first implementation, but it uses a massive amount of energy. It has very low capacity. The most transactions per day Bitcoin has ever done is around 1 million. That's not a worldwide technology. The best way to increase it is actually bring in a new, better technology. And so that's what Ethereum tried to do. Ethereum tried to be faster. Now they're making a block every 12 seconds. They do the same thing, so they still use all that energy, and they still are only doing about, I think 1.4 million transactions per day. Still not enough. Our current record is 33 million transactions per day, and that's not even coming to our capacity. So we believe right now we could probably do 500 million transactions per day. So now we're talking about something that could conceivably start to serve large parts of the world. If we were to build the whole capacity of the world's new financial system on this better thing, but running each of these chains took the energy output of Belgium, which is about what Bitcoin takes, that would be a problem. Telos takes the output of about 15 to 15 clothes dryers running at the same time. And we can do our carbon offsets to adjust for that, orders of magnitude less. So we use less power.
And if you could get rid of centralized powers, if you could get rid of nation state governments, would you do that? Or do you see a place for centralized systems and for decentralized systems? What does the best world look like in your mind?
Best world to me looks like, over time, a peaceful, bloodless migration to a system where individuals carry the power and governments, as they exist, serve the individuals as the individuals decide. I think a lot of these governance functions will be handled using human voted mechanisms that are enforced and carried out by computers, including AIs, where humans and our individual votes are still the driving, determining factor. While we've built on Telos a lot of the tools that allow this, that no one's ever built before, it's going to be a long time. The ideal situation is that we move to this in a way that is empowering to people and is not overly disruptive.
Would you disband governments then if you had your way?
I personally wouldn't. I think what will happen is that our definition of what governments are and do will, over a reasonable amount of time, evolve into something that is much more based on a social contract between individuals and less between a social contract between individuals and a government.
Would you still encourage and support the cultural symbols of what it means to be an American, but move the power to make decisions and to control money flows away from what is currently synonymous. The idea of the United States is synonymous with the governance structures that hold it in Congress and Senate.
My personal opinion is that nationalism is a negative force. It's a rah, our team as a reason to dislike other people's teams. Mm-hmm. It's an us versus them. My hope is that in time, we can get over this sort of genetically coded, tribalism where the other is bad. That's the past of our planet and our species. And that was fine before we evolved into such powerful creatures that can change the course of the entire planet. Now that we have nuclear weapons and massively, polluting industrial machines, I think we have to get to something where we understand, that we're all us. There is no them and there is no us. We are all us. And I think this is a way to get us towards that. I certainly am not advocating the teardown of certainly not the violent teardown of any kind of government. Governance today looks different than governance did 500 years ago, right? That became in the form of evolution, and it probably some kind of big shift is necessary over time for us to stop being so fragmented on this planet. I don't know exactly how that comes. What I think happens is that as governments show that they're not doing a very good job in solving these problems, and new tools come in with computers and this blockchain consensus and things like that, that we'll be able to offer better solutions, and that those better solutions will win, just as in the same way that better business solutions tend to win over older, more antiquated ways of thinking.
And who sets to win economically from telos?
Early adopters are the builders of it. So in some ways you could say that they deserve it. That's 5%, and that's distributed, a year and a half ago when we launched.
The main metaphor that I have a problem with in the history of money since we moved from a bartering system, and we've been back there a couple times in different use cases.
We may be back there soon for a while.
We may be back there soon, but whether it's gold or whether you're talking about the modern money system that's backed by oil effectively that props up the US dollar, really the whole history of money beyond changing my goat for your eggs is based on extractive processes where we dig around, we pull stuff out, and we use it and turn up the ecosystem with no attempt to, or little attempt in most cases, to restore it or regenerate or care for it. And I think for me, whether we're talking about, Bitcoin's proof of work method that, as you said, takes as much energy as Morocco or Belgium, or whether we're talking about, as you mentioned earlier, the current oil price that's going haywire, and we can talk about that. But for me, the move that we need to make is out of extractive metaphors and processes and into regenerative or restorative processes and metaphors. So for me, last week being having Kuhn on the show, who's talking about regenerative agriculture, is very exciting for me as somebody who's working on a system, because it's the beautiful metaphor, the agroforestry metaphor, to grow our future together and to work with nature in a kind of a symbiotic relationship is exactly the artistic pool I want to be pulling from. And I don't know if you would see it a similar way, or whether you have some other view on that kind of.
No, I agree very much. Telos has brought in a number of regenerative economy projects. The one we're working on included. Another big one that's launched recently is called Seeds, and and I think you should look into it. It's quite interesting. It's a worldwide regenerative economy that envisions a whole different kind of money. People can look at this at joinseeds.com. I believe in regenerative economies. And the problem, I think, started with this whole extractive economy, started with the fact that the economic model basically looked at the world resources as free, both free to take and extract, and only started counting something as having economic value if you added your labor to the physical world. But the physical world was, in this model, free to pull from. And then by extension, free to dump shit into too. There was no place on the ledger for what you took out of nature and what you pumped back into nature. So those were just never counted, and we inherited this system, and it's deeply wrong. To a point, as long as you can pump invisible, harmful poison gases into the air, and no one can quite see where they're coming from, and no one can quite see where they're going to, and they haven't reached a critical mass where they're impacting people, then it's easy to pretend that you have no waste in your system. And so that persisted for a long time. And now that we've come to a crisis point, we have the science, which we had since the 70s, frankly, to understand that these do have harms and impacts. My concern, so the oil price just crashed. It's minus $37 per barrel, meaning that if you can deliver a barrel of oil, somebody who owns that oil contract will give you $37 for each barrel. It's 1,000 barrels per contract, so $37,000 they'll give to you to take the oil. That's weird. My concern is that price dumping may lead to actual oil dumping. Some unscrupulous person is going to say, oh, I'll buy 10 or 100 contracts, right, for almost $4 million. And all I have to do is dump 1 million barrels of oil somewhere. As long as you're willing to accept the delivery of those barrels of oil and put it somewhere, you can just dump it somewhere else and get oil and $4 million. And there's millions of these contracts. Someone is going to dump this stuff, right? So economical disasters turn into ecological disasters. People break these rules and extract and don't give a shit about the environment because they can, because there's no record. And because they feel like they can pay, if there is a record, they can pay off the guy who keeps the records. By eliminating that system and having a system that can't be altered and that can't be just rewritten by some guy who's got the secret keys, we can hold people to account. I believe in regenerative economies. I believe in creating these set of tools that hold people to account and therefore make it cost more than $4 million to dump the 1 million barrels of oil.
Yeah, that's good. So on a practical level, these are long journeys building blockchain networks, and you do a lot of work for free or for little money. What is it at the moment? Like 3 years into this project?
For Telos, it's about 2 years on Telos itself, but I was working on other projects prior to that.
When you look at the road ahead for you personally, you wake up in the morning, you get your coffee, you start doing endless Zoom calls. What project within your Telos world ecosystem is the thing that's the most exciting for you, that you think, wow, the thing we're doing here, if this works or may already be working, is the thing that I think, wow, we're really offering a public service here?
What excites me is these projects that are doing amazing things that are empowered by what we're doing. There's a couple of really cool carbon credit based projects coming to Telos. And I'm excited about those because I think that's important. I'm not the ideal person to do a carbon credit project, but I was able to, start a project that built these tools that allowed them to do it, that extended their abilities. And right now what I do mainly is work with these guys, and say, let's show you how to use these tools, right? Because right now we built them, but not that many people know how to use it. If we show you how to do this and empower you, you can get a year ahead in your mission. I watched the promise of the internet go from a peer-to-peer, individual empowering utopia to, Cambridge Analytica and Facebook and all the current mess. We lost that opportunity. And I think that blockchain is sort of like our second or maybe last bite at the apple to really empower people, because otherwise these crises are constantly going to drive us towards the use of technology in controlling people. And I think that we can use it to empower people.
So if we extrapolate out a little bit into thinking about new agreements at large, how we organize this world, outside of the world of Telos, probably I can imagine it would be an idea that has helped power Telos, but what is the primary new agreement that you could tell us that you think we need to start sort of signing up to together to alter our social contract, whether that's in our own lives, domestically in our households, or whether it's a macro social contract that we all agree to something different?
The primary driver, I think, is the need to put individuals in the driver's seat. Not one individual, but collective individuals in the decision-making process, and include the entire life cycle of things like energy production and whatnot in those decisions. So on the macro level, it means that people have, for the first time, more of a direct democracy. The last workable direct democracy you had was back in, city-states in Greece. And of course, it was a lie anyway, because because, you know, women and slaves and whatever didn't get to have a, you know, it was only landed men, right? But direct democracy is very difficult. So we've all gone to representative democracy that puts like lawmakers in great positions of power. With this new technology, we actually have, for the first time, the ability to move consensus back to almost a direct democracy. I don't think individuals are generally the problem. People in the power positions are extracting, you know, value from that itself, much like mining or, you know, extracting from the natural world. They're herding sheep and we're the sheep.
That's great, Douglas. Thank you so much for giving us an intro into blockchain, into ledgers, into the journey that led a filmmaker into building a decentralized network, which became Telos. And thanks for, you know, inviting the Corcovado community into your world to collaborate. Special mention to Roger, Rory, and Jim, who have been very diligent, very lucky to have met them along my journey. In helping us scope out the Corco coin. If people want to get hold of you, what's the best way to find you?
So on Twitter, I'm Douglas_Horn, Horn. On Telegram, I'm DapperD, DAPPERD. Pretty easy to reach me. And thank you for having me. I've been such a fan of what you've been doing towards, you know, building exactly the kind of things that we're trying to champion. And I'm excited when the Corco coin comes out, because I think that that's a great example of, you know, giving people a way to say, hey, we have a problem with all this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And before, there was no really good way for us to get together and feel like we could have an impact. And suddenly you're giving us a way to have an impact. And so we're taking part. And I'm excited to see how that grows, because it's a really exciting thing. And I would love to come back on when you can talk more fully about that, because I'm jazzed about that.
Yeah, no, there'll be plenty of spaces to do that. And I look forward to that next conversation. And thanks to Good Block for giving Corco Coin a grant to help with our staking, to deal with the machine costs that are involved in hosting Corco Coin on the Telos network. And also, I should mention that the Telos Foundation group, in your consensus style way of making decisions, decided to give us a grant to assist with the development of the coin on your platform. To be honest, more than anything, it's just been a gesture that has been appreciated as you're trying to slowly build relationships between different communities. You say it's a trustless system, and we would be here for too long if we debated that. But I think any time that two people are doing something, regardless of what technology they are or aren't using, there's always an element of trust and relationship being built, even if there's good evidence to support it. Yeah. These gestures have been very helpful in as markers along the journey. So thanks to you and the rest of the crew that have collaborated with us thus far. I know it is time for us to draw this to a close. And so I just want to say to you guys, thanks very much for listening to another episode of New Agreements. I hope you've learned something here from Douglas and his experience. I'm sure I'll be back with you again very soon. Check Douglas out on Twitter. Go and see Telos, Telos, Telos Foundation. Just Google it, you'll find it, telos.net. Yeah, that's it. And we'll see you soon again on New Agreements.